Chapter 549, True Purpose. The young man supporting Juan Oro glanced up at Lumian, who sat beside the carriage driver with one leg bent, the other propped up. His eyes blazed with undisguised anger. The carriage driver jumped in fright and desperately tried to distance himself from Lumian. However, with a horse in front of him and Lugano on his left, dodging proved impossible in his haste. Lugano swallowed hard, blaming his employer for being overly aggressive. Is he trying to imitate Jayman Sparrow? But his employer hadn't exhibited such madness before. Instead, he seemed intelligent. Juan Oro, an elderly man with mottled black hair, seemed oblivious to the revolver pointed at his forehead. He turned his head, stepped aside from the firearm, and continued forward. Observing this, Lumian pulled the trigger without hesitation. Bang! A yellow bullet shot from the revolver, heading straight for the side of Juan Oro's head. At some point, a palm intercepted the bullet, causing it to decelerate and spin. The bullet landed in the palm, feeling as if it had fallen into a thick swamp. The wide, bronzed hand belonged to the young man supporting Juan Oro. He glared at Lumian, his lips curling in disdain. Then, he bellowed, "Have you lost your mind?" Before he could finish, fiery crimson orbs, nearly white in hue, materialized right in front of him, barely a meter away. They surrounded him in a blaze. Almost instantly, Lumian felt as though he'd been ripped from reality. The carriage disappeared from beneath him, the ground vanished from his sight, and he found himself in an endless void of darkness. The crimson fireballs, almost white, were controlled by an unseen force and changed direction, hurtling down from their original path. Rumble! They collided with the roadside dozens of meters away, carving deep, massive craters. The horses, startled, reared up, neighing in terror. The carriage driver instinctively pulled at the reins, struggling to calm the panicked animals. The illusion Lumian experienced dissolved with the explosion. He saw Juan Oro and the lad again. Juan Oro, deeply wrinkled with his beard and hair standing on end, lifted his black cane and growled in a low voice, "Have you had enough?" Lumian grinned and raised his revolver once more, aiming it at the president of the Fisheries Guild. At that moment, Rubio Paco's voice echoed from the rear carriage. "Let them through," he spoke in Intijan. Only then did Lumian lower his arm and offer a smile in Intijan. "My employer says you're free to pass." He acted as if he couldn't comprehend Juan Oro and the lad's Highlander. Juan Oro observed him for a moment before shifting his attention. Using his cane, he circled around to the side of the carriage. The lad supporting him shot a glare at Lumian, but he was at a loss for cuss words since Lumian couldn't understand. Juan Oro glanced at the window and calmly inquired, "Martha, I heard you're not feeling well." "Yes," the old lady weakly replied through the glass. Juan Oro nodded. "Has the governor given you permission to seek treatment? Do you need my help in pleading your case?" "He's already given permission," Rubio replied on behalf of his mother. "That's good," Juan Oro nodded slightly and didn't press further. He turned and slowly walked toward the building housing the governor of the Sea's residence, using his cane as a crutch. The young man supporting him shot a final glare at Lumian before refocusing on the old man. Lumian adjusted his posture, acting as if nothing had transpired. He said to Lugano, "The carriage can continue forward." Lugano snapped out of his daze and quickly directed the startled carriage driver to soothe the horses and exit Milo Village as soon as possible. Without any issues, they made their way back to 21 St. Lana Street. Lumian retrieved Ludwig, his mouth still glistening with oil, from Georgia and smiled at Rubio Paco. "Remember your promise, otherwise—" He smiled and left the statement hanging. "Don't worry," Rubio replied in Intijan. After Louis Barry, his godson and the interpreter departed, Georgia sighed in relief and glanced at her husband. "I've never seen a child eat so much. He must be abnormal." "Otherwise, Louis Barry wouldn't have let him stay with us so easily," Rubio responded, unfazed. Aquina Street, Salo Motel. After shutting the door, Lugano couldn't resist asking Lumian, "Why were you so aggressive? He's the president of the Port Santa Fisheries Guild, a big shot. And we're in Milo Village." He suspected his employer had some hidden agenda. Lumion gave his guide a glance and grinned. Why else, when making a scene in public, it's unlikely both parties can go all out. It's the perfect chance to test them, see what they're made of. Trying it under the cover of night, when no one cares about the Earth Mother Church's authority and the Phaenopotter government, that would be way too risky. If Lumion had discovered that Juan Oro had godlike powers, he'd need to act quickly and call for backup. Ah, I see, Lugano had an epiphany. His employer's craziness was just a facade. Every radical move had an ulterior motive. But why is he in Port Santa? Is he planning something during the sea prayer ritual? Why target people from the Fisheries Guild? That sounds very dangerous. Should I resign early and forget about the remaining paycheck? Lumion observed the silent interpreter and strolled over to a reclining chair in the living room, settling in with a smile. He leaned back and relaxed. What he'd told Lugano was just one layer of the motivations behind his recent actions, the most surface-level one. Most importantly, Lumion aimed to send a clear message with his radical actions. He was in Port Santa to investigate the sea prayer ritual, unafraid of the Fisheries Guild or Milo Village. He possessed the strength and courage to back it up. Breaking into the governor of the sea's residence, or casually pointing a gun at Juan Oro's head and firing, all of it was to convey this information. Lumion believed there were dissatisfied people in Port Santa regarding the Fisheries Guild's sea prayer ritual. After all, the primary beneficiaries were fishermen, sea merchants, and those in related industries, not representative of the entire Port Santa population. For instance, even though the Church of Earth Mother and the Port Santa government had allowed the Fisheries Guild autonomy and excluded outsiders from involvement, someone bold enough to investigate, regardless of consequences, might tempt others. Could they silently or even covertly support this person to stir up trouble for their benefit? Likewise, the beneficiaries wouldn't be united. Some gaining meant others losing. The powerful had jealous rivals. While not wanting the sea prayer ritual to end, they likely desired those in power to suffer and vacate their positions. Lumion, by setting up a flag to investigate the sea prayer ritual and displaying decisiveness, steadfastness, and strength, didn't need to painstakingly gather clues. From his residence, he could receive various pieces of information, openly and covertly, and compare them to determine authenticity. For an outsider with limited time, this was the fastest and most effective way to uncover the entire sea prayer ritual process and the truth about last year's accident. For the key member of April Fools lurking in the shadows, possibly setting a trap, this was a strategic move to draw attention to adventurer Louis Barry and raise suspicion. In due time, armed with the acquired information and discovered clues, Lumion had a chance to expose them through their own trap. Of course, the main drawback of this plan was its relative danger. Putting himself in the spotlight was a risk, but in the pursuit of prey, risks were inevitable. Moreover, Lumion had plenty of allies. As these thoughts raced through Lumion's mind, he realized that becoming a conspirer had given him a clearer understanding of the situation and the conflicts between various groups. Using a term favored by Auror, he developed a deeper insight into conspiracies. The most brilliant conspiracy is an open conspiracy. This became a key principle for his future acting. Around 2 p.m., Lumion spotted his messenger, Penitent Baneful, emerging from the void and handing him a letter. Puzzled, he asked, "Who's it from?" Haven't those he needed to communicate with already been reached? "It's from the tall demoness," Baneful replied. What's up with Franca again? Lumion took the letter and began reading. The man she and Jenna encountered on the 4th level of the catacombs is suspected to be from the world where the Celestial Master resides, the world before her transmigration. Lumion's pupils dilated slightly. This was different from the members of the curly-haired Baboons Research Society. They had transmigrated through their souls, but these individuals had brought their bodies over. In the midst of his surprise, Lumion pondered a crucial question. Why would someone like that venture into the 4th level of the catacombs? Was it because the Samaritan women's spring lay sealed there, along with the river Styx's overflowing water that bridged the two worlds? Had similar individuals entered our world before? If so, why hadn't they left any trace like Emperor Roselle and the other transmigrators? Franca and Jenna's expedition to the fourth level of the catacombs appears laden with coincidences. Not only did they uncover a new mirror world fragment, but they also encountered such a person. After penning a letter to Franca, Lumion was about to request Lugano to translate today's newspapers when footsteps echoed from the corridor. His eyebrows twitched as he pulled up an armchair, facing the door. Knock, knock, knock. A few seconds later, a knock resounded on their suite's door. "Who is it?" Lugano inquired. A mature and gentle voice floated from beyond the door. "I'm Nolia of the Fertility Order." Upon hearing this name, Lumion leaned back slightly and offered a smile. He sensed that his digestion of the Conspirer potion had progressed a bit further.